Hello and welcome to this Friday edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We have a packed show for you and our big focus is on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's historic visit to Ukraine. It was a meeting closely watched around the world. There was a handshake and a warm hug as Prime Minister Narendra Modi met President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on the first ever visit to Ukraine by an Indian Prime Minister. Before their official talks began, there was a poignant moment when the two leaders visited the Martyrologist exposition at the Ukraine National Museum in Kyiv in honor of the children killed in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Prime Minister Modi said the conflict is particularly devastating for young children. During his meeting with the Russian president 6 weeks ago, the Prime Minister had stated, "When children are killed, the heart bleeds and the pain is unbearable." As the two leaders met at the presidential palace in Kyiv, Prime Minister Narendra Modi told the Ukrainian president, and I quote, "We were never neutral. From day one, we have taken a side and we stand firmly for peace." The Prime Minister also told President Zelensky, "Whatever help is required from a humanitarian standpoint, India will always stand with you and will go above and beyond to support you." The India-Ukraine joint statement issued after the talks states, "The Indian side reiterated its principled position and focus on peaceful resolution through dialogue and diplomacy, as a part of which India attended the Summit on Peace in Ukraine held in Switzerland in June this year." Prime Minister Modi reiterated the need for sincere and practical engagement between all stakeholders to develop innovative solutions that will have broad acceptability and contribute towards early restoration of peace. He reiterated India's willingness to contribute in all possible ways to facilitate an early return of peace. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said at a press conference that the two leaders also discussed Prime Minister Modi's conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin during a meeting in Moscow in July. Jaishankar said it is India's view that the two sides need to engage with each other to find a solution. India and Ukraine also signed 4 agreements today which would provide for cooperation in agriculture and food industry, medicine, culture and humanitarian assistance. The two leaders discussed various aspects of bilateral ties. According to the joint statement, both leaders expressed mutual interest in working towards elevating bilateral relations from a comprehensive partnership to a strategic partnership in the future. The two sides agreed to expedite work on expanding the legal framework of bilateral ties, particularly regarding mutual protection of investments and exploring mutual recognition of educational documents and academic degrees. Now, this has been described as a historic visit to Ukraine, the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries in 1992. The visit comes at a significant moment in the more than 2 years of war, as Ukraine's forces are mounting a major incursion into Russia's Kursk region, while Moscow's army is advancing in eastern Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi reached Ukraine after a nearly 10-hour train journey on Rail Force 1 from Poland, Kyiv's close ally and a key transit for foreign leaders heading to its war-torn neighbor. When Prime Minister Modi had met and hugged Putin in Moscow in the month of July, he had received trenchant criticism from the Western media and President Zelensky himself, who had termed the meeting and the embrace a huge disappointment and a big blow to peace efforts. Addressing this criticism during the press conference today, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said, "There is a cultural gap which people in the West may not understand. Today, Zelensky hugged Prime Minister Modi as well." Of course, India has long-standing ties with Russia and Moscow remains a key supplier of oil and weapons to New Delhi. Jaishankar said much of the discussion between Prime Minister Modi and President Zelensky was about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. During multiple interactions even in the past at various international forums with both the Russian and Ukrainian presidents, Prime Minister Modi has been at pains to point out that India is on the side of peace and would continue to do everything within its means to support a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine conflict, and that the way to peace can only be through dialogue and diplomacy. On Thursday, Prime Minister Modi held talks with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Warsaw and said the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and West Asia are a matter of deep concern and that dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward to restore peace. He added, this is India's firm belief that no problem can be solved on the battlefield. In any crisis, the loss of lives of innocent people has become the biggest challenge for the whole of humanity. The question is, can India play peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine?
The death of innocent children, and it's very painful for any civilized world, for all those people who believe in humanitarian values, for all those people who are sensitive to humanitarian values. Such incidents are totally unacceptable. In the whole world, for all those people who believe in humanitarian values, such incidents cannot be accepted.
इसको स्वीकार नहीं कर सकता है। एक्सेलेंसी, इस दर्दनाक परिस्थितियों के बीच भी
Your Excellency, despite those tragic circumstances, you welcomed my delegation and myself with such warmth. I convey my heartfelt gratitude to you for that.
मैं हृदय से आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। एक्सेलेंसी, आज का दिवस भारत और यूक्रेन के संबंधों के लिए
Your Excellency, today is a historic day in India-Ukraine relations. Today, for the very first time, an Indian Prime Minister is visiting the land of Ukraine. This on its own is a very historic event.
ये अपने आप में एक ऐतिहासिक घटना है। कल आपका नेशनल डे है। ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण दिवस है।
Tomorrow is your national day. It's a very important day, and on my own behalf and on behalf of the 1.4 billion people of India, I convey my very best wishes to you, and I hope and I pray for peace and prosperity of Ukraine.
और मैं कामना करता हूँ शांति के लिए, सुख और समृद्धि के लिए। एक्सेलेंसी, 2021 में ग्लासगो में मिले थे।
Excellency, in 2021, we had met for the first time in Glasgow. And from the very first meeting with you, I felt a very deep sense of friendship with you. And you very respectfully invited me to Ukraine. And at that time, I could not even realize that I would be visiting Ukraine under such circumstances.
Dear Mr. Prime Minister Modi, it is a great honor for us to meet in Ukraine the Prime Minister of India, friendly India, in Ukraine on the day of our national flag. It is very symbolic, because it is a historic moment. This is the first visit of India's Prime Minister to an independent Ukraine on the eve of Independence Day. This visit is really friendly, important for all the Ukrainians. I want to personally thank India's Prime Minister for starting his visit with commemorating killed Ukrainian children that were killed by the Russian army. They killed the children with their aggression. I am very thankful for this commemoration of Ukrainian children. As of today, we signed 4 documents with the Indian side during this historic visit of Prime Minister Modi. The documents concern medical area, agrarian cooperation, humanitarian relations, also culture. We prepared a joint statement after the PM's visit regarding the development of strategic cooperation between our countries, trade between our countries, and military cooperation. All of it should strengthen. I am very thankful for it. I am happy to see you. Glory to Ukraine.
Sanctions issue, I would say, look, generally, in India, we do not impose sanctions on any country. It's not part of our political, diplomatic history. If at all there are sanctions, we generally look at UN sanctions. Those are the sanctions that we respect.
All right, it's been described as a historic visit. What are the key takeaways? We're going to look at that with our panel of experts in just a moment after this quick break on Global Lens. Stay with us.
Give it to me, pass. We'll put new glasses in the windows and they keep breaking it. This is the 4th time. You are playing football throughout the day. Will you win the world by playing football?
Yes, uncle. I will now conquer the world by playing football. Let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt, News9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
Hey, careful, huh? My daddy got it from abroad. Hey, disaster! How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect. Take risk with full understanding.
So much good. Invest good.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic presidential nominee.
I made my choice. Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds, predators. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
I am the one saving democracy.
He has tapped into the fear and anxiety about demographic change in the US.
This polarization in the United States. Some people are even suggesting that there could be a civil war.
You are this unable to solve your own domestic problems. You have no right to claim to be anybody else in the world, and we're moving into a multipolar world where the United States will not lead.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and our big focus tonight is on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's historic visit to war-torn Ukraine. Let's now introduce our guest. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Defence and Geopolitical Analyst, Patikrant Payan, Foreign Affairs Expert, and a little later on the show we'll be joined by Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, former Indian diplomat. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, let me begin with you. There are some who have seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Poland and Ukraine as a balancing act, given that this visit comes roughly 6 weeks after the Prime Minister's visit to Moscow, where he met President Putin. But then there is another dimension to it. There are many who believe that India is uniquely positioned to, engage in some sort of a mediatory role between the two warring nations, given that it has friendly ties with both those countries. What do you make of the primary message that Prime Minister Modi carried to Poland and Ukraine, where he said India was never neutral, we chose a stand, we stand firmly on the side of peace, no solution can be found on the battleground, dialogue and diplomacy are the only way forward. Also, do you believe that this visit and finally the hug that we saw between Prime Minister Modi and President Zelensky would have perhaps assuaged the Ukrainian president, who was very angry when he saw that hug between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin in the month of July?
Thank you, Neha. At the very outset, I must say India's investment for the future, because India realizes that the kind of agreements this got signed between India and Ukraine is indicative that, this 910 days plus confrontation between Ukraine and Russia appears to be coming to a close somewhere or the other. That's why all these activities are on. And at the same time, the warmth that was shown, the invitation of Mr. Zelensky, the Prime Minister, after 10 hours of a train ride reaching Kyiv, as an indication that Ukraine also sees India as someone reliable, someone trustworthy, someone with whom they can seek a reconstruction of Ukraine in the near future, because India is also an economy placed fifth today, very soon will be third, and $5 trillion, $10 trillion, sooner getting to $15 trillion is indicative that out of the three top economies of the world, two of them are democratic, where the support to them is always from USA. They now are finding that India is yet another country with whom they have excellent relations. Investments into defense, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, education. So many of our students were there doing medicine. So indicative that yes, the good old relations are there, and India seems reliable. India seems trustworthy. India believes in the rule of law. India is a democracy, and therefore the trust can be reposed in India. And that is where that kind of you can see the warmth. And despite what you said, the hug that Mr. Modi had with Putin, probably the hug this time was a little more warmer, giving a feeling of assurance to Mr. Zelensky that we understand what you're going through. We stand by you. And even the presentation of those Bhishma kits, that is the initiative which turns to those cubes for making quick hospitals, ICUs to be able to treat about 200 casualties, is all indicative. I think first visit of Indian Prime Minister after the formation of Ukraine as an independent country from 1991, and almost on the eve of the National Day, is all very much, I think, quite a clear messaging that there is a possibility of India. I wouldn't call it mediate, no, definitely not. A part facilitate, yes, because he volunteered to say that if there is anything that we can do to bring in peace. But I think these stands seem a little adamant on both sides, because Ukraine looks at it from, peace from their point of view is on their terms. Russia finds that the peace would be on their terms. And what Mr. Lavrov have said, that, well, there can't be a possibility of talks because of this offensive that has taken place. Zaporizhia, a nuclear plant, which is just about 30 kilometers, probably some talks are already on, that some raid, this, that, and all on the plant was planned on. So there is a bit of tension. But all this, Ukraine seems positive that this offensive might lead Russia on the negotiating table. The Prime Minister also saying very clearly that this is the time for diplomacy, and now you can't come on to a solution in the battlefield. All this, and this is not an era of war, indicative. And Ukraine, I find that despite the kind of hardship that Ukraine has gone through, is willing to negotiate with Russia, and Russia was willing to negotiate with Ukraine till it found itself on a back foot, because the amount of supplies that came to Ukraine from the NATO countries, resulting in those 3 bridges being blown off, which the Russians never expected. Probably they were caught at the back foot on the same river, and that offensive that went through again, leading to a lot of the PWs with Ukraine. The Russians are there. So this is something which is probably might lead Russians also to rethink that Ukraine is not what they thought it was.
Very interesting, because the advances that Ukraine is making in the Kursk region clearly has come as quite a blow to Russia. And interesting choice of words there, Lieutenant General. Not quite mediation, but perhaps facilitation. But the million-dollar question still remains, can India really lead these two warring nations onto the path of negotiations and dialogue? Let me take this to our other guest, Patikrit Pan. Patikrit Pan, there were a few poignant moments during this visit, during the meeting between the two leaders today. The Lieutenant General says that the hug that we saw between Prime Minister Modi and Zelensky today was probably a bit warmer than the hug between the Prime Minister and the Russian President 6 weeks ago. There was that moment when the two leaders paid tribute to the children, the Ukrainian children who've been killed in the ongoing war. We saw the Prime Minister's hand firmly placed on the shoulder of the Ukrainian President. And then, of course, that message of peace, the fact that India has always stood on the side of peace and continues to push and advocate for dialogue and diplomacy. We all know how angry President Zelensky was when he saw that hug between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin 6 weeks ago. How reassuring do you believe Prime Minister Modi's visit to Ukraine might have been for Kyiv and its leadership today?
Well, Neha, first of all, I don't think Prime Minister Modi hugged Zelensky because Zelensky was angry because Modi hugged Putin. I don't think geopolitics or international relations work like that. Prime Minister Modi has always brought in the personal touch when it comes to international relations, and he has very good relation with most of the global leaders. First and foremost, I think the most important thing what the Prime Minister is doing right now is this, that he is showing the path to the rest of the world that if you essentially want two countries who are fighting to stop a war, then you cannot start by branding one country as a pariah, one country as a devil, and then portraying the other country as the one on whom you would put all the support, and then you expect that the two countries will sit together and negotiate. It doesn't happen that way. So what the Prime Minister is trying to do is this, that you got to respect both the countries without taking any side, and then you ask them to come together and facilitate any kind of negotiation if it's possible. Today, I think India is the only country which is in talking terms, both with Ukraine and Russia. I don't think the same is the case with the NATO countries or US. But I also believe this, that this is not a war between Russia and Ukraine going on. This is a war between Russia and NATO going on. And I do not think that just because of a Kursk invasion or a Kursk, whatever the Ukrainians have done, Russia will be forced to come into the negotiating table, because somebody then has to go back to the history of Nazi invasion of Soviet Union and what the Soviets did to actually push back and then go and attack decimate the Nazis. So there's a history to it. I would rather prefer that peace prevails, but I don't know how much leverage Zelensky has with himself to stop this war, because barely a month after the conflict started in 2022, Russia and Ukraine were on the verge of a negotiation which was stopped by Biden administration and Prime Minister of UK that time, Boris Johnson. Now, why it is important for India to have peace? It is for this reason. India, as a voice of global South, every time there are sanctions or conflicts, it has disruptions in the supply chains of commodities and prices go up. Every time there are sanctions, prices go up. Smaller countries, developing countries, including a country like India, which might be the 5th largest economy of the world, suffer because we are dependent on so many imports, whether it is the edible oil, whether it is oil, fossil fuel, everything goes up. One of the reasons why edible oil prices are so high in India today, and there's a lot of politics around it, is because of the conflict in Ukraine. We used to import a lot of sunflower oil from that region. And also, we must understand this. Our military preparedness does get impacted because of a Russia-Ukraine conflict. Most of the warships that Indian Navy has, which are of Russian origin, the engines are made by a Ukrainian company called Zoria Mashproact. One of the issues that happened this time in this visit is that the Ukrainians are having a joint venture in India, so that those gas turbines are made in India through a joint venture, most probably with Bharat Forge, the Kalyani systems. The other thing is this, we have more than 100 AN-32 planes in our fleet of Indian Air Force. Those are all made in Ukraine. Its upgradation, overhaul, maintenance are all, were supposed to be happening in Ukraine. It stopped somewhere in between because of the conflict. So there are pertinent reasons for us to have this war to end, right? But whether it would end or not, it is not in India's hand. India can only facilitate if somebody asks for it. The Russians are not asking for a facilitation. The Ukrainians cannot stop this war. NATO will not allow this war to be stopped, because there are other pertinent vested interests involved in this war, including the military-industrial complex, who has wonderful business going on out of this. But as a voice of Global South, it has been India's stance that you have to have peace. This cannot be a war of this cannot be an era of war, because everyone suffers of this war. It is not in an era of globalization. It cannot be that India will remain immune if other countries continue to have conflicts. But Zelensky must understand one thing, Neha. The West cannot keep on pushing us, oh, you have to be on the right side of history. I mean, come on, there are regions of India occupied by China. There are regions of India occupied by Pakistan. When was the last time Ukraine made a statement on that? When was the last time we said somebody, you have to choose between me and Russia, or me and China, or me and Pakistan? No, we haven't done that. So I think this visit was not because of pressure. I mean, Zelensky cannot pressurize us.
neither the West. But yes, India as a responsible country, and India as a country which believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, India as a country which believes and realizes it has to have good relation, both with Russia as well as with the Western countries, has gone ahead and do this. It's not because Zelensky was angry. I mean, Zelensky must understand and tell his own country, was enough done by Zelensky and NATO to stop the war? I doubt. I have my own doubts. And to believe that Russia will come to the negotiating table because of Kursk invasion by NATO logistics, NATO command centers, NATO communication line, and NATO personnel having done that, I doubt, and I believe, sadly so, that in the next 6 to 8 months, the conflict might cross the contours of Ukraine and might push towards Poland and other countries. Because if the NATO countries had thought that the war would end, or Russia's regime change would happen and Putin will be defeated, it has not happened. Russian economy today is far more resilient. It is a de-dollarized economy. It has told to the rest of the world that you might put sanctions on me, but you will still buy my commodities from a third party. And that is exactly what the hypocrites of Western world has done by buying the same things from India, third party, while telling India, why are you buying from Russia? So we need to understand the world needs peace, and that is why Prime Minister has gone ahead. This is very significant. We are a nuclear power, and we can tell the world that we have survived and progressed in a difficult neighborhood with countries like China, with countries like Pakistan, yet we have gone ahead and maintained peace. We have managed relationship, something the Ukrainians must also learn to live with Russia and vice versa, and not all the time go for a war just because NATO wants it. So I think there are a lot of dimensions to it. I don't know whether India can solve this problem or not, but the stand taken by India is something very new. I mean, what Prime Minister is doing today is something what the UN Secretary General should have done. There should have been a dispute resolution mechanism. They should have gone to Russia. They should have gone to Ukraine. Talk to them, respect them, show them respect, then ask them to come to the negotiating table. The moment you brand Putin as a war criminal, how do you expect Putin to come to the war, negotiating table? And mind you, my last point, NATO today is using Ukraine to fight a war which NATO itself doesn't want to fight. So NATO would keep on fighting this war against Russia till the last Ukrainian standing. And that is why, sadly so, this war is not going to end, and we all eventually will suffer as time progresses.
You may have a point, though things might change just in case Donald Trump were to get re-elected to the White House in November this year. And you've made a very interesting point there. You're saying that what Prime Minister Modi has done by reaching out to both Russia and Ukraine and their presidents is something that the United Nations Secretary General should have perhaps done. Of course, the UN stand has always been that we cannot mediate unless we're asked to do so by both sides. And in fact, that is something that India also maintains, that we can play a role only if both sides want us to. What we have seen in recent weeks is that the presidents of these two warring nations have certainly had very warm meetings with Prime Minister Modi and in a sense exhibited their faith in India and in its honest intentions. And while many have quote-unquote accused India of being neutral, today the Prime Minister made an interesting statement that we were never neutral, we've always been on the side of peace. I'm sure, Patikrit, you would have also been impressed with Jaishankar's statement today when asked by a Western reporter about the hug between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin. Jaishankar said, well, today Zelensky hugged Prime Minister Modi as well. This is probably just a cultural gap which the West is not able to understand. You may not have it in your culture, but we do. Very quickly, before I take a break, what did you make of that?
No, absolutely, Neha. First and foremost, as I say, Prime Minister Modi brings the human touch in every relationship. And also, Neha, we must understand, we do not take sides, but both the countries are suffering because of this conflict. And so the pressure on both the respective head of state is immense. So if you actually bring a human touch to this relationship and you actually, you don't need to, sometimes words don't work. You just need to give a hug and tell that person, I understand what you're going through. And that is the situation both the Russians and the Ukrainians are going through. And that is what the Indians have done. We are not going and saying that we can solve the issue, but at least we understand that we empathize with what you're going through because we have gone through the similar things. The West must, that is exactly what I'm saying, Neha, that you need to respect both sides if you essentially want to stop the conflict. understand their perspective, and then only you can ask them to come to the negotiating table. The West has stopped all the doors of negotiation. Then you can't expect Putin to come in because you have already, termed him as a war criminal, and then you push in for the Kursk invasion. That somewhere I think you are just fueling the war, not trying to stop the war. India is doing exactly opposite of that.
That is interesting and a fair point. That one thing that India has done is to express empathy with both sides. Of course, the question still remains, can we really play a larger role in bringing a peaceful resolution to this conflict? This is a question that we'll delve into further in our next segment after this quick break.
Fast. My God, isn't she your daughter?
Yes.
She's playing football. This is boys' game. Make her study. If she doesn't get a good job, she will get a good match. Will you win the world by playing football?
Yes, auntie. My daughter will win the world by playing football.
Let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt, News9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
Big fan of Ian Bell, watching him very classy in all formats.
I find Durban quite a challenge, which is still an enjoyable one.
You're not allowed to bowl a bouncer, so that tells you that they want to see runs on the board.
बड़े अच्छे टूर्स किए हैं, बड़ी अच्छी यादें हैं हर जगह की, जहाँ मैंने पर्सनली क्रिकेट को बहुत एंजॉय किया है. ऑस्ट्रेलिया एंड इंडिया में बहुत ज़्यादा एंजॉय किया.
I love playing again England and India, and they were both very different challenges.
Up close and personal with legendary cricketers like never before. Icons of the pitch.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
Terrorism always flows like water. It will go in the direction where there is no obstacle.
Bloodbath in Jammu. 5 soldiers die after terrorists open fire at an army convoy in Kathua.
Pakistan essentially is doing is opening a new frontier in the Jammu region.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's historic visit to Ukraine and the key takeaways from this visit. Before I go back to my panel, let's listen in to what Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said about Prime Minister Modi's visit to Kyiv just a short while ago.
His name is Ukraine, and you're a big country. You have big influence, and you can stop Putin, and you can stop and hold his economy and put him really on his place. And his place, you know where is his place.
Very interesting. You're a big country. You can put him in his place. A clear reference there to President Putin. All right, Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar also joining us at this point in time. Welcome to Global Lens, Ambassador Sajanhar. Now, apart from Foreign Minister Jaishankar explaining the hug diplomacy that Prime Minister Modi engages in. When asked by a Western reporter about his hug with President Putin, and when he said it's a cultural difference that many in the West do not understand, what really did you make of, the utterances from the two sides? Needless to say, this was a very important visit that was being closely watched around the world. There was a very poignant moment when the two leaders honored the memory of the Ukrainian children who've been killed in this war. We saw a warm hug between the two leaders, and we saw Prime Minister Modi reassuring the Ukrainian president by saying, whatever help is required from a humanitarian standpoint, India will always stand with you and will go above and beyond to support you. He also stated, we were never neutral. From day one, we've taken a side and we have stood firmly on the side of peace. But you just heard the Ukrainian president there saying, India is a big country. India can put Putin in his place. Now, knowing about India's long-standing ties with Russia and that much talked about visit to Russia by Prime Minister Modi, I'm pretty sure President Zelensky knows that that is not something that's going to happen. So the question really is, what according to you are the key takeaways from Prime Minister Modi's visit to Kyiv? Do you believe it has done enough to, in a sense, assuage Kyiv, especially given the angry outbursts that we'd seen from the Ukrainian president after Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow?
Yeah, thank you very much, Neha. If I would say, the question is, has it done enough to assuage? I think it would have done more than enough to assuage, but my point would be that that is really not the objective of the visit. Some people have sought to suggest that maybe it is in terms of optics, it is symbolic, etc. But all that might be all right. But I think this visit is very substantive in its terms, as the External Affairs Minister has said. It's a landmark visit, not only landmark because it is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister since Ukraine became independent, but more so because the visit is taking place during the conflict that has been going on for the last 30 months. Meaning the visit, if it had taken place at any other time, if the conflict was not going on, would also have been very significant and historic. But the importance of that increases much more because I think the hopes of the world are also, to an extent, and definitely as far as Ukraine is concerned, and you heard President Zelensky, and you just played out what he said, that India can put Putin in his place. But I think the world also feels that India's, with its influence, with its, the large territory, the large economy, and growing, its policy of multi-alignment, where it has good relations with Russia, with the West, with US, with Europe, with Ukraine, that it can definitely play a role. The other aspect is that other countries, many other countries have tried, whether it is Turkey, whether it is China or others, they have really not been able to succeed as far as bringing a closure to the war is concerned. We've seen the 13-point plan from China. It has really fallen flat on its face, and there are no takers for it. But I think the whole world is watching Prime Minister Modi's visit with very keen interest and attention as to what is going to happen. And I think Prime Minister Modi has, whatever he says, whatever he utters, it is all very considered, very deliberate, very well thought through. So I don't think his words should be taken lightly. He has said that India is ready to play a role, India is ready to play a part, and he himself is also willing to contribute in any way that he possibly can. So I think possibly at the top leadership level, we have seen that timing is right, because so far, barring the, after the war started, it was after the first few months in September, October 22, that, Ukraine was able to make some advances. But after that, it has really not been it has really become a war of attrition between the two sides. And it is Russia which has been slowly but gradually gaining more ground, both literally as well as figuratively. But it is only very recently, last 2-3 weeks, we have seen a very decisive incursion by Ukraine in the Kursk region of Russia. They have been able to capture about 1,500 kilometers of territory. And, as reports seem to suggest, there are thousands of Russian soldiers that are confined to that particular region. The point I'm making is that at this moment, there appears to be that the advantage is not totally with Russia, not totally in Mr. Putin's hand, and there is some bit of a balance that has been restored. So, looking at it, that Russia is also tired of the war, Ukraine and the West are also tired of the war, the world is tired of the war, other countries have tried and that have failed. So, this is the right time that some initiative can be taken which has some possibility of success. That Prime Minister Modi has taken this step, and of course as it is said, the devil is in the detail, but and it will be a slow process, but hopefully a steady process of taking things forward, because this message has gone out very clearly by the Prime Minister, both to Mr. Putin as well as to Mr. Zelensky, that no resolution of any dispute can be found on the battlefield, and we have to come to the table, we have to discuss. And of course, along with this, there is the bilateral context of our relationship with Ukraine, which we have seen some agreements have been signed. And of course, we plan to take that relationship forward. And also, Prime Minister said that in terms of humanitarian help and assistance, we have, right from the word go, from the beginning, we have been supplying, we have been providing humanitarian aid, medicines, food, tents, and other required items, and that will continue. Maybe that will even expand after the visit of the Prime Minister.
All right. Let me take this back to Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. General Kulkarni, of course, the message, from Prime Minister Modi is unequivocal that we must give peace a chance. The two sides should be willing to return to the negotiating table. And then you hear President Zelensky saying India is a big country, you can put Putin in his place. Now, that is where the problem lies. The deeply entrenched positions on both sides, thanks to which the war has already gone on for close to 2.5 years. And therefore, the question is, what really is the way forward?
Neha, I would much like to go along with Ambassador Sajana. First and foremost, most people visited Ukraine till now either to boost the morale of Ukraine, equip it with more arsenal, and to pump him to fight it out. Here's our Prime Minister who's gone there not with a view to pump him to go all out for war, but to somehow be able to tell him that, look, we understand the difficulties that you're going through. We are your friend. We are also friends to Russia. And if there's anything that we can do to ease it, why not? We are there to help you out. So that itself is adequate. And what better than the kind of warmth the relationship has between the two countries, despite what is going on. Even before this meeting, the Prime Minister has met him a number of times. He's met him at Hiroshima, he's met him at Glasgow, on and off, places. So there is a lot. Even in the last 6 months, the kind of delegations that have come from Ukraine to India is indicative that there was something that was there. Ukraine looks at India with hope, trust, faith, and a feeling that here's a country which we have had excellent relations, both on the agricultural front as also on the defense front. Be it the aircraft, be it the tanks, be it submarines, be it normal nuclear, everything and anything besides, of course, the agriculture, the fertilizer, the pharmaceuticals, and a whole lot of it. And that is very good. And Ukraine had at that point of time $15,000 per capita income, which is very good. And with India, with Russia also, not only just that, you see Saudi Arabia attempted, Turkey attempted, China attempted, Vatican attempted, everyone's been attempting to bring in peace. But so far, none have actually succeeded. Why not? The Prime Minister is there. And the invitations on behalf of Mr. Zelensky, much that what is going on, he also probably feels that enough is enough. They can't pull along because, after all, 4 crore population of Ukraine, 50% of it is almost left Ukraine. Very little are left. Not many soldiers are now available. However much you might be equipped, but it doesn't really work that way. The Russians also, it is not that ending. It's 910 days of war. It's not so easy. How much can the Russians do? There's a limit to which that the Russians are fighting, not just Ukraine, they're fighting 30 countries, and 30 countries equipping. The boots on ground may be Ukrainians, but the arsenal is coming from somewhere. And this, particularly the Kursk offensive, I think the Russians, it was on August 6th, today is 23rd, and therefore you find that it isn't moving anywhere. By now the counteroffensive should have come. The Russians aren't able to do counteroffensive because the bridges have been blown on the same river, and indicative is that the Ukrainians have an upper hand in that. And it's not a small enclave that has been taken. It's about 1,500 square kilometers of an enclave taken, which is just about 30 kilometers from the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. So there also the Russians are feeling a little uneasy because the nuclear plant is in custody of the Russians. So both sides,
taken up this matter with the IAEA. Russia is certainly rattled, and they've taken up this matter with the nuclear watchdog IAEA as well. So the incursions, the Ukrainian incursions in Kursk certainly come as a setback to Russia. But as we wrap up this discussion, Patikrit Pain, I'm out of time. I'm going to ask you this quick question. You mentioned earlier that you believe that there are too many vested interests on all sides for this war to go on and on. But in the earlier segment, you seem to agree that if Trump were to get re-elected to the White House, you actually believe that things could change and that he's somebody who could actually bring an end to this conflict?
Well, from what I have understood, what Trump wants to do, I think Trump would ask NATO to pay more for the security that US provides to Europe. And I think he would stop the funding of Ukraine, which is almost $60 billion for this financial year. Whether it would stop Russian, incursion or invasion of Ukraine, or whether it would stop Russia from avenging what has been done to Russia, as General Kulkarni mentioned, about 30-odd countries that Russia is fighting. Well, that is another question. I don't know whether Putin would stop or not. But certainly there is some glimmer of hope that if Trump comes back, there can be some kind of a hope for some kind of a cessation of conflict. But if the other side comes, then it's going to be very bad. This is what I will. I'm not taking a partisan side, but as things look at right now, as I may have mentioned, I don't want to repeat. The West has already termed Russia as a pariah. You cannot play the victim card and at the same time doing a Kursk invasion. I'm just saying as an analyst, I'm not speaking on behalf of government of India. So, there are complexities, there are too many paradoxes in what's happening. See, we must understand one thing. Everything said and done, even Putin beyond the point is accountable to the people of Russia. I think the Russians are not very happy with what's happening right now. They might say,
one might have to disagree with you on that respectfully, Patikrit, but we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much, Patikrit Pain, Ambassador Sajanhar and Lieutenant General Kulkarni for joining me on Global Lens tonight. Let's in fact now cut across to a press conference that's being addressed by the Ukrainian president in Kyiv.
How to find alternatives. Because it's not about, again, you're a very big country, it's not about millions, it's about billions which are coming back, which Putin has back to Russia, and then he uses it only, because he has now really officially, he has now war economy. War economy, it means that the priority is war, not peace. Not only for his soldiers. It meant that priority for his economy is war. And of course, if billions will come, and they are coming from any market, from India, Arabic countries, China, of course it helps him very much. So he has to feel how war is expensive, and his society has to feel, because he will not feel. Even if he will not get billions, he will not feel, because he's stolen all these billions from his people. His people are poor people, so he's stolen it during 30 years. That's why he will not feel it. But if his society will feel they will push him to the peace. It's also very important because his society, they don't understand what's going on or understand and support him because of the media influence in their country, because Putin controls all the media totally, 100%, and social media, not only public, commercial, everything. That's the role of India. If you will stop import the oil, Putin will have huge challenges, huge challenges. The sword, I think it's peace way, or way to peace, yeah. So I think we spoke about it with Prime Minister. So of course we want him very much to have in peace summit, and of course we'll be happy to work on it. And of course, if he has his ideas or his team ideas, we'll be happy to speak about it. But we don't change our territories on any propositions. So we don't change our people to any propositions, and our territories, and our values, and our freedom and democracy. We will not change it. So it's absolutely understanding points. All other things we can speak, we can decide, we can find any. But I spoke very openly with Prime Minister. Prime Minister Modi wants peace more than Putin. This is the problem. You understand? So the problem that Putin doesn't want. I don't know what about they spoke. I mean, all the details with Putin when they had meeting and etc. But I said to Prime Minister, with whom you have a deal. I mean that you speak with him, he is speaking to you how he wants peace, but at this moment exactly he is attacking hospital. Did he do anything good for us? No, he's a killer for us. But did he do something good for you? For India? If during official visit of Prime Minister you attack the children in the hospital? It's a very important moment. So he had to recognize after that he doesn't respect India or doesn't control his army. And he will tell you that Putin controls everything. So he can't say that he doesn't control his army. So it means that he doesn't respect Indian Prime Minister. Otherwise, why he did it? So for me, he's very clear. He's not so smart as his Russian TV shows his people each day. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, but in Ukrainian, it could be shorter. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, thank you for your time. Dinako Peri, I work for a newspaper called The Hindu. From what you said, I'll just seek two clarifications. One, you talked of the oil purchases. So, what was the conversation since you said you raised it, but has there been some definitive, thing which has been proposed or pitched, alternative discussed? One, two, you also talked about the co-development and co-production high-tech technologies. Can you just elaborate on any specific things that you have discussed, what has been offered, or what is the roadmap for this going forward? Thank you.
Well, for today, long line, I don't know maybe how to say it in English, a big number of different kinds of such technological things. It's about agricultural, about demining, about medicine, about security. Like I said, it's drones, it's electronic warfare systems, it's a lot. It's connections and etc. Like I said, against cyber attacks. So we are ready to speak about it, to speak about sea drones and a lot of different technologies. We had, I think, good agreements before the war about engines to Europe, defending sector, and etc. So we are very open with all of this, and we are ready to co-produce for our both markets. That's what I said. Of course, we can do after the war more, 10 times more, because for today the priority is to defend ourselves. I think that you understand it. But anyway, we are ready to begin this work, because the war will finish anyway. We know it, and we want to do it, and we're very open for this. Then, as I said, agriculture, not only growing, not only, but also about, we can speak about the hubs, how to save, how to secure agricultural products during long period of time with all this climate and other challenges. So we are ready also with this. You asked about alternatives for the import of oil. Yeah. So, we can't say that we shared. We understand what money Russia has on this deal with India. We understand it very, very much and very well with details. That's why, so we want to try to do everything possible to stop it. But we
All right, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressing a press conference following the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Kyiv, and he's made some very important points there about India's potential role in this conflict and how it can be resolved. For starters, well, Zelenskyy says India is a big country that can put Putin in his place. He says if India stops buying oil from Russia, it will hurt Putin and his war economy. Putin needs to be taught that a war is expensive and comes at a heavy price. And in fact, interestingly, Zelenskyy even added there, the problem is Prime Minister Modi seems to want peace more than Putin does. Well, of course, it's been a historic visit by Prime Minister Modi to Kyiv. Lots there to unpack, a lot that will continue to be dissected over the next several days, but we are completely out of time. Thanks so much for watching the Friday edition of Global Lens. See you again at the same time on Monday. Have a great weekend ahead.
Quite lived up to their pre-tournament billing, delivering a series of less than convincing performances. For 2 draws and a solitary win.
Your son will be Messi. No studies, just football all day. Go, my son, go. Make my face shine through playing football.
Not only your face, but also the country's. I will conquer the world by playing football. Come, let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt, News9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play